Detective Emily Parker was sitting at her desk, sifting through a stack of paperwork when her phone rang. She answered with a brisk, "Detective Parker speaking." On the other end was a frantic woman named Karen Johnson, who told Parker that her son, Ethan, had gone missing. Karen sounded panicked, and Parker could hear the tremble in her voice as she spoke. Parker immediately sprang into action, gathering her things and making her way to Karen's house. As she drove, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping over her. She had seen cases like this before, and they rarely ended well. When she arrived at Karen's house, Parker was met by a woman who appeared to be in her mid-30s. Karen was pacing back and forth, wringing her hands and muttering to herself. Her eyes were red and puffy, evidence of the tears she had no doubt shed over the last few hours. Parker tried to calm Karen down, but her efforts were in vain. Karen was inconsolable, and Parker knew that the only way to get to the bottom of this was to begin the investigation. She asked Karen to recount everything she knew about Ethan's disappearance, and Karen gave a detailed account of the morning's events. Parker listened carefully, taking note of every detail. She knew that the first few hours were critical in cases like this, and she needed to act fast if she was going to find Ethan before it was too late. With a sense of determination, Parker set out to find the missing boy, hoping that she would be able to bring him home safely. As Detective Parker delved deeper into the investigation, she discovered a clue that would change everything. She found a note in Ethan's backpack that mentioned a special sacrifice for Mother's Day. The note sent chills down Parker's spine, and she knew that she was dealing with something far more sinister than a simple missing persons case. Parker confronted Karen with the note, hoping to get some answers. However, Karen denied any knowledge of it, insisting that she had no idea what it meant. Parker was skeptical, but she didn't have any concrete evidence to support her suspicions. Parker began to dig deeper into Karen's background, looking for any clues that might link her to the note. She discovered that Karen had a troubled past, marked by a series of failed relationships and a history of mental illness. Parker wondered if Karen's troubled past could have played a role in Ethan's disappearance. As Parker continued to investigate, Karen began to manipulate her, playing on her sympathies and pretending to be a loving mother who was desperate to find her son. Parker began to feel as if she was being drawn into Karen's twisted game, and she struggled to maintain her objectivity. Despite Karen's attempts to derail the investigation, Parker continued to follow every lead, determined to get to the truth. She knew that time was running out, and she was willing to do whatever it took to find Ethan and bring him home safely. Parker's investigation led her to a small, rundown house on the outskirts of town. It was clear that the house had been abandoned for years, and Parker wondered what she would find inside. As she made her way inside, Parker was hit by the stench of decay and rot. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet, and the sound echoed through the empty house. Parker slowly made her way through the house, her senses on high alert. She searched every room, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Just as she was about to give up, she noticed a small trapdoor hidden beneath a rug in the corner of one of the rooms. With a sense of trepidation, Parker opened the trapdoor and descended into the dark, dank basement below. As she shone her flashlight around the room, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The basement was filled with strange, macabre objects, a pentagram etched into the floor, candles scattered around the room, and strange symbols painted on the walls. In the corner of the room, Parker saw a small figure lying on a makeshift altar. It was Ethan. Parker rushed over to him, checking for signs of life. Thankfully, he was still alive, although he was badly injured and barely conscious. She called for backup and an ambulance, and within minutes, The basement was swarming with police. As Ethan was rushed to the hospital, Parker searched the rest of the house. She discovered a series of journals hidden away in one of the rooms, detailing Karen's descent into madness and her plan to sacrifice her son as a tribute to some dark deity. Parker knew that she had to arrest Karen, but she couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness for the woman who had lost her grip on reality. She wondered what could have driven Karen to commit such a heinous act, and she knew that the investigation was far from over. Karen was quickly apprehended and taken into custody. Parker couldn't believe what she had uncovered. A mother who was willing to sacrifice her own child to appease some dark entity. As Karen was interrogated, she seemed to be in a trance-like state, muttering strange incantations under her breath. It was clear that she was deeply disturbed, and Parker wondered if there was any hope for her to ever recover. Meanwhile, Ethan was fighting for his life in the hospital. He had lost a lot of blood and had suffered severe trauma, but the doctors were doing everything they could to save him. Parker spent hours poring over the journals that Karen had kept, trying to piece together what had happened and why. She discovered that Karen had been obsessed with the idea of sacrificing her son for years and had been collecting the items needed for the ritual for a long time. The more Parker read, the more disturbed she became. She couldn't believe that a mother could be capable of such unspeakable evil. As she closed the journal and set it aside, Parker knew that she had to do everything in her power to ensure that Karen was held accountable for her actions. She knew that it would be a long and difficult road to justice, but she was determined to see it through. With a heavy heart, Parker left the interrogation room and headed back to the hospital to check on Ethan. She prayed that he would make a full recovery and that justice would be served for his sake and for the sake of all those affected by Karen's madness. Karen's trial was one of the most highly publicized cases in recent memory. Parker had been called to testify as an expert witness, and she had spent weeks preparing for the trial. As she took the stand and looked out at the sea of faces in the courtroom, Parker felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. She knew that the outcome of this trial could have far-reaching implications for the justice system and for society as a whole. The prosecution presented a compelling case, detailing Karen's obsession with the dark entity she believed she needed to appease. They also presented evidence of the ritual items Karen had collected, as well as her journals and notes detailing her plan to sacrifice her own son. Karen's defense team argued that she was not in her right mind at the time of the incident, and that she was suffering from severe mental illness. They also tried to argue that the dark entity Karen believed she was appeasing was real, and that she was not responsible for her actions. Parker listened intently to both sides of the argument, and she knew that the truth lay somewhere in between. Karen had been consumed by her obsession, but she had also made a conscious decision to go through with the sacrifice of her own child. In the end, the jury found Karen guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Parker felt a sense of relief as the trial came to a close, but she also knew that there was a long road of healing ahead for all those affected by Karen's actions. As she left the courtroom, she prayed that justice had been served, and that Ethan's memory could finally be laid to rest.